Insider Football with Lloyd Vance is back for another week on 1029 The Game and the Broad Street South Network. So glad that everyone could be with us this evening. Hard to believe we're at week 11 is in the books and we're moving towards week 12. Always remember it's an 18-week marathon and there's 17 games for each team. Some of the contenders have really stepped forward and there are lots of pretenders. Lots to get into, and we're going to have Ryan F. shortly join me, and we're going to hit all the big stories around the National Football League and keep everybody in the know because that's what we do here on Insider Football. It's your one-stop shop for all around the National Football League. Myself, Lloyd Vance, I've been around the game in locker rooms, working for committees, etc. Know lots of people around the community of the National Football League for around 20 years or so. Had some nice projects for ESPN and NFL Network that I've been part of. So you always have my tentacles out there and my ears to the ground trying to get what is on top and the most important things around the league. In looking at the biggest stories that we're going to cover this evening, we really got to talk about the Super Bowl 57 rematch that just took place on Monday night in Kansas City. The Philadelphia Eagles in a game that some are saying, wow, they got it done. It doesn't matter what the stats say or anything. The Eagles got the W, and we'll talk about where those two teams go from there. Another big story is health of quarterbacks around the league. We had two other quarterbacks get knocked out for the season, and I'm already starting to hear, and I was on a couple other shows where they said, Lloyd, are they going to have to institute some rules and get these guys healthy? This week it was Deshaun Watson and kind of cloudy situation. He had a shoulder injury, and now he's having surgery. And then mysteriously, you had Joe Burrow on Thursday night and an injury that we can talk about their cloudy situation that may have not been reported. He had a hurt wrist and he has a torn ligament in that wrist, and he's done for the season. So two more frontline quarterbacks that are out there now joining Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins. And a lot of people are saying this may be the season of the backup, and we're seeing some mediocrity in play because of these missing quarterbacks. We'll talk about that. And finally, it happened with the Jets. Zach Wilson, we all said all along he was not that guy. After another very poor performance where his team could not put up any points and his receivers were very upset. Robert Saleh, another coach that's trying to save his job, pulls the trigger, and he benched him in the third quarter. And Tim Boyle came in, and now Tim Boyle is going to be the quarterback there. So we'll touch on that. The Steelers made a lot of their fans happy today. You hate to see somebody lose their job, but offensive coordinator Matt Canada, he got his pink slip, and that offense that's been so inept, and a lot of people calling for his job. Mike Tomlin was trying to play the loyal leader and keep Matt Canada around. They gave him his walking papers. We'll touch on that when Ryan gets on. You had a great comeback in Detroit, very improbable, and we'll touch on that. And then one of the biggest things this time of year, you got to start talking about the playoff picture. And that leads to coaches on a hot seat. Some of these coaches really, the seats are red hot, and you're seeing tempers starting to flare in a lot of places. There was some histrionics and some ugliness in a press conference. We'll touch on that as well. And then, of course, always our favorite, we'll give out my weekly game ball and my Lloyd's lackey to somebody that just couldn't get it done. So glad to be with you on 1029 The Game and the Broad Street South Network. I'm Lloyd Vance, your host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football. Well, Monday night, this game, it kind of lived up to the hype, kind of didn't, but you had the Philadelphia Eagles 9-1 traveling to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. who are now 7-3, and it was a game where 29 million viewers watched this game. So, it was on ESPN, it was on ABC, it was on ESPN Plus, and it was a game that everybody wanted to see. I previewed this with my friend Rich Quinones on his show, Rich on Q, um, and we talked about the weather conditions and how it may affect this game. Now, this game was played in a cold, rainy night in Kansas City. You almost would have hoped that the conditions would have been better. That may have led to a better performance because you had a lot of stoic defense and a lot of punts, to be honest with you. The Eagles punted 7 times and the Chiefs punted 6 times. So you were hoping for a pinball machine type of game like we saw in a Super Bowl between Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts. But in the end, it was a situation where the Eagles stayed the course. And unfortunately, the Chiefs, which has been their MO this season, they continue to get leads and not score points in the second quarter. So we'll touch on all that. And I was talking with our producer, Angel, earlier, and Angel is a big Eagles fan, and he wanted to stick it to Ryan when he comes on because we all know Ryan is a Chiefs supporter. I don't know how that happened. He lives in Pennsylvania, but he's a Chiefs supporter, and we can get, when he comes on, we can talk about the shoulda, woulda, coulda of this situation and where the Chiefs go from here. So, obviously, when you talk about this game, the biggest play was at the end. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, he had an opportunity late in the fourth quarter to pull the Chiefs from the abyss, a perfectly thrown pass by Patrick Mahomes, where it was right in his hands, and he dropped it, and that would have been a potential game-winning touchdown, and it just was a microcosm of what Patrick Mahomes has been dealing with this season in terms of receivers. It was on full display on Monday night. The Chiefs lead the NFL in terms of pass catchers. They have 26 drop passes, and Mahomes just does not have a lot of help. After Tyreek Hill left last year, they kind of had shored things up. They had Juju Smith-Schuster, and Juju is now with the New England Patriots, and you're left with a lot of guys that just are not getting the job done in terms of helping their quarterback. And you have the best quarterback in the National Football League, and you have to feel bad for him that Brett Beach, and who's the general manager there, and Andy Reid, they kind of did him a disservice in who they brought in. And I see Ryan's on now, and he had his eyes glued to this one, just like 29 million other fans. And he's on one side of the equation as a Chiefs fan, and I have Angel, who's quiet right now, but I heard he was on an earlier show. He was a little, he was patting himself on the back because his Eagles pulled it out. And I'll serve as the net, because I'm still kind of in an analyst mode. I am in the Philadelphia area, so I have a lot of family members that are Eagles fans, and they always tell me, "Oh, you just don't like the Eagles." But I call it like it is when I look at this Eagles team, and it was a good game, competitive. The Chiefs jumped out to that 17-7 lead, Brian, early in the first half. Butker gets the field goal. They go in the locker room, and then it's been the same story the last 3 games where they just don't put any points on the board in the second half. And I got to tip my cap to Spagnuolo. His defense is playing very well. They don't have Bolton, who's injured. You got guys like Willie Gay and McGuffey. They're doing a nice job for them. But they sacked Hurts 5 times. But in the second half, the drops and a big fumble, and they lost a turnover battle only by 1. But that came back to bite them, and then the Eagles took advantage of it. So what did you see there, Ryan? And do you have your tissues?
Catch the damn ball. That's what you're paid to do, is to catch the damn ball. And on the flip side of it, I mean, you just wasted another good, defensive game by the Chiefs. But you are 32nd out of 32 teams scoring offense in the second half of the 2023 NFL season. You are not going to win a lot of games if that's going to be the case. They just can't score. They get up just like the Miami game in Germany. You get up 21-0 early, and then they don't keep the foot on the throat. They let them back in, and I don't know, Lloyd. I mean, drop passes, defense is playing well. Pat. And again, I'm glad you said it because you're backing me up. And I said it on previous shows. Brett Veach did nothing in the offseason to address it. He did nothing by the trade deadline to address it. And it was almost like he was saying, we'd won with this group last year. We can do it again this year. And they're going to suffer for it in the long run.
Yeah, and all those years in Philadelphia when I was covering Andy Reid, he would always say we're good enough at wide receiver position. Hey, guys like Todd Pinskin, James Thrash, and Freddie Mitchell, they just were not going to get it done in the key situations, and that's what you're seeing a lot here. You have Justin Watson. He had amazingly 11 targets, but he only had 5 catches. He had that huge drop on that last play of the game where Mahomes, crazily enough, it was 4th and 25, and I thought back to the old Eagles days when it was 4th and 26. I said, oh, they may convert this, and he put the ball in his hands and he didn't get it done. And another player I want to touch on, Ryan, is what is going on? Is Travis Kelce, is his head too much in the clouds with Taylor Swift or what? Because he's talking about retirement, and he did have 7 receptions on 9 targets, but only for 44 yards. He did have a TD, but he had a huge fumble and he had a 3rd down drop in the game. Is he the same guy, or is it teams kind of game planning against him? I know the Eagles were running like 3 guys at him, including Kevin Byard. Do you think that's what it is, or what do you think's going on with Kelce?
I think he's probably a little bit more hurt than what people realize. I don't think he's 100% healthy. And again, the weather had a lot to do with yesterday's game. Not that either team's going to use it as an excuse, but I just think that, he got hurt in the preseason, then he came back, then he had a little bit of a tweak. So I just don't think at this particular time of the year he's 100% healthy. And let's face it, he's frustrated because he's doing his thing week in and week out, but he's not getting any help from anywhere else. When you look around, you see the guys around you that are dropping balls, maybe not running the right route or whatnot. It starts playing with your head a little bit because, again, Kelce can't do it all. Mahomes can't do it all. And let's face it, they ran all over Philadelphia's run defense last night. And that was surprising to me. When you ran all over them,
Yeah.
and that's supposed to be, and you don't win the football game, I mean, they shoot themselves in the foot more than the other team beats them.
Yeah, and as good as they are in terms of the stat box, and I said this before we came on, all the stats, they dominated. The Chiefs had 23 first downs to the Eagles 16. They had 336 total yards to the Eagles 236. The rush yards, which you talk about, 168 rushing yards to only 114 for the Eagles, and then they held the ball for 32 minutes as opposed to the Eagles 27 and some change. So, they did everything except score. And that interception in the end zone, everybody's wondering, okay, did Watson run the wrong route? Well, what happened there? Mahomes he's had some problems this year in terms of interceptions. He's approaching 10 interceptions. I think he has 9 so far in the season. So he needs to, I just don't think he trusts these guys. And as we said, they've never replaced Tyreek Hill. Yes, last year they got by with who they had. Juju had a couple nice games, and some other guys stepped up. But I think they'd had a big misevaluation on Sky Moore, he's kind of a gadget guy and he's not a front line receiver. And then they bring McCole Hardman back, and he's just not. Yeah, maybe he may be a pretty good punt returner or something like that, but he's another guy who's just not stepped up. Kadarius Toney, Well, we know he's had his problems, and he's not the guy they thought they was coming over from the Giants when they got them. So, you know, all is not lost for them. But the game was there for them to take, and the biggest one of the biggest things I wanted, my jaw almost hit the ground when Andy Reid punted the ball from his own that 40-yard line, and it goes in the end zone, and it gives the Eagles a fresh start.
Yep.
What were you thinking there?
I don't know. I mean, everything that could go wrong yesterday, did go wrong, to be quite honest with you. And they built the 17-7 lead, and I was like, we've been here before, throughout
Right.
the season. And it's just, sometimes Andy Reid does such great things, and then he does some things that make you go, like CNC Music Factory used to say, things that make you go, So,
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't know. Look, Eric Bieniemy's not there anymore. He's not calling the plays. I thought Eric Bieniemy spread the ball, but again, Andy Reid can't catch the football. Andy Reid can't
Right.
catch the football and then Kelsey fumbles it. There were a multitude of things collectively that led to the loss because I said that Philadelphia didn't do anything spectacular, Lloyd. I mean, they may have made some adjustments at the half, but again, when your defense like the Chiefs is playing like they are, but you can't sustain leads,
Right.
it just your defense wears down in the second half.
Yes, and you have non just Hurts. He gets his tush push touchdown, and he had 2 touchdowns rushing football, 12 rushes for 29 yards. He was sacked 5 times, as I said earlier. But in terms of passing, only 14 completions for 150 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception. So you're right. That defense was doing their job, and it's crazy. For so many years, we said the Chiefs, offense was carrying their defense. They were always in these high scoring type games, but now that defense has come along, and with Chris Jones and the rest of those guys, Karlaftis, he had another sack. He has 7 now, and they have a lot of teeth on that defense. And a big stat that showed this is, and the disparity in how the two teams played. Kansas City 8 for 17 on third down, 2 for 3 on fourth down. The Eagles were only 3 of 11 on third down, and they didn't even go for it on fourth down once. So, it's one of those games where the Eagles hang around and they get it done. You never want to take the W from anybody and talk about style points and this and that, but they got the big W, and both teams are kind of moving forward. It's going to be interesting though because the Eagles have a tough stretch coming up. We've talked about this several times
Yep.
in terms about where do these teams go from here, and the Eagles they have Buffalo. That's in Philly, and then they have the Niners, who seem to right at the ship. We're probably going to talk about them in a minute. The Niners have, after that 3-game losing streak, now won 2 in a row, and they're getting healthy. They have Chase Young; they're looking very dangerous. Then the Eagles are at that big game at Dallas, December 10th, at Seattle, who Seattle's kind of up and down as well, and then they finish with a nice 3-game stretch against the Giants, Arizona, and the Giants again. So the Eagles, they're going to have to hurdle off the Detroit Lions. And so they're probably going to have to play better. It's going to be interesting to see how Buffalo comes into Philly because they played well last week. And then conversely, when you look at the Chiefs, I think they may be able to run the table here. They're loss at the Raiders, and you're going to say poor Raiders here, because they're going to be indoors. Mahomes is going to be feeling good, and I think they're going to put up a number this week. They're going to be angry. At Green Bay, we saw them. They got lucky to win this week. Buffalo at New England. The Raiders again. Cincinnati, who I talked about before you came on, is in trouble now that they don't have a quarterback. And then the Chargers in the last game. And we probably, Brandon Staley probably will not be coaching that game. So the schedule is very favorable to the Chiefs. And as we all know, Andy just wants to get to the tournament. So now he's 30 and 7 after a bye, and what he really wants is that bye in the playoffs, and they only have to play 2 games, preferably in Arrowhead. So it'll be interesting to see if the Ravens, who are now 8-3, can maintain that lead. But anything else on this game before we wrap it up? I know Angel was saying make sure I stuck it to you pretty good, but what do you think?
Well, I mean, the Chiefs going forward, they're going to have to try and figure something out to help out their defense. Offensively, they've got to be able to put something together in the second half because, look, the Raiders game scares me just because the Raiders are playing a little bit better. Now you have the Broncos playing well. So yes, Kansas City is still in the division, most likely. But now you got the Broncos are putting a little bit of pressure on them with the way the Broncos are playing right now. A lot of people thought the Broncos were out of it, and on the flip side of it, with Philadelphia, again, you got a Bills team that's going to be hungry because they're playing for a wild card at this point. And they're gonna the dog is in the corner with the Bills, so the Eagles better watch out because I can see the Bills winning that game. So again, 7 weeks left, a lot of football to be played. Anything could happen. So I think both teams are going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, and then you have everybody's darling, the Detroit Lions is sitting out there. They're only a game behind the Eagles, and they're another team with a pretty nice schedule coming down the stretch. I know they play Dallas at Dallas in Week 17, which will be a big game, and we'll have to see about that. Obviously, they have the Thanksgiving special coming up, and we'll get in those games. But when you talk about the Eagles and the Chiefs, they got 2-game lead, both of them. So I always say start with division, and I think they'll win their division first and foremost, and we'll just go from there. All right, and segue. A big story, Ryan, is we had 2 quarterbacks go down, 2 marquee guys this week, and kind of under strange circumstances. I'll start with Deshaun Watson.
Hmm.
This was an interesting one because he was fighting with his training staff, or was it coaching staff? He played through an injury. Did he want to get shot up and play in the game? We're not sure what it is. He goes in during midweek, and then they find out, he's got a fracture in his shoulder and he needs surgery. So he's no longer going to be in the game. Surprisingly, Cleveland, they're 7-3. Did you watch this awful game? I mean, it was terrible. Cleveland beats the Steelers 13-10 in a game that had nary any offense, and the young rookie DTR, Thompson Robinson was out there in his first start. He gets to win. He really didn't do a lot, but Cleveland is built around that defense. And then conversely, the Steelers, they just don't have any offense other than Warren running the football. Pickett is terrible. He has not had. He has 2 touchdown passes since October, and that led to finally Mike Tomlin pulling the trigger today. I was talking about Matt Canada is finally relieved of his OC duties. They've elevated running back coach Eddie Faulkner to be the new OC. But where do you see Cleveland after this injury, and can they weather the storm and make the playoffs?
I mean, they sort of going to have to figure something out about their identity. You're going to run the football and play great defense. You're going to have to, especially getting in December and in January. And it's looking like they're going to make the playoffs. They could still even win a division, to be quite honest with you. So I just think DTR, don't make mistakes. If it's not there, get rid of it or take off with it. Let the run game work. Let our defense take over. And on the flip side of it with Pittsburgh, I mean, what are you going to do, Pittsburgh? I mean, are you going to stick with – I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to stick with Pickett or are you going to go to Trubisky? I mean, they're basically mirror images of one another. So Jalen Warren, Najee Harris, again, Cleveland's defense is a lot better than Pittsburgh's, but you're going to have to try and figure out how to run the ball to keep your defense off the field a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, dicey situation for both, especially with the quarterback position. So do I think both teams can make the playoffs with the way the AFC is right now? Probably. But how far they go remains to be seen. But I just think that both these teams are going to have to rely heavily on the running game going forward.
Yeah, the running the football and their best player. Maybe they could put him at quarterback. Miles Garrett's the best player for the Browns, and T.J. Watt is the best player for the Steelers. It's unfortunate, but their quarterback play is very down for them. But 7-3, and that's what I always say: stack the W's and then see how it turns out from there. Um, so that was the Browns. We'll see how they continue to go forward. Obviously, Stefanski's doing a great job there in terms of that team. He loses Nick Chubb as well. Earlier in the season, they've lost a lot, but the Browns keep fighting, and their fans are extremely excited about them. And it's crazy because you have the Browns and the Lions are both playing very well.
Yep.
And the other quarterback injury that reared its head was on Thursday night. That was Joe Burrow. He gets off the bus. He has a brace on his wrist, and they're like, "Oh, they didn't report it all week." I went back and looked at the injury reports. He was not on there, and so there was a situation where they may be fined, and the league talking to him. But about midway through the game, he can't throw a pass and can't grip the football, and it comes out he has a torn ligament in there, and he's done. And now Cincinnati, who fought their way back to 5-5, they have an undrafted free agent, and they're in big trouble. So we talked about how great the AFC North was at one time, but I think it's going to be a struggle for Cincinnati to get out of the basement.
Yeah, I mean, for Cincinnati, it's the same thing. I mean, you're going to have to rely more on Mixon than you have been all year long. And, Higgins might come back this week, I think. Maybe they hold off another week. I don't know. But, yeah, I mean, it's going to affect Higgins. It's going to affect Chase. And again, I don't think they've used Mixon the way I thought that they were going to use him. They're going to have to rely on that a little bit more. So a lot of these teams with quarterback issues, Lloyd, I know it's a passing league, but now we're seeing how important the running game is going to be going forward because a lot of the playoff contenders who no longer have a quarterback are going to look at the Jets. They don't rely on Brees Hall as much. They've got the slew of running backs, and yet they don't use them. So, again, I know the onus has been on the passing game and the quarterbacks and the receivers, but the running backs will be pushing this year to get paid, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, and you got to have them, and you got to have a backup. Backup quarterback is huge, and you have to have somebody with the ability to come in there and not embarrass himself. It doesn't take much in today's NFL because, as you said, a lot of these teams have good supporting casts. They like the Browns, for example, they have a very strong offensive line, one of the top two offensive lines in the league, and they're going to lean on that and that defense that's ranked 1 or 2, I think, in yards against and points at this point. So, Cleveland's not waving the white flag. They're gonna keep fighting, and
Yep.
that was a good win for them. But as I said, it was an ugly game to watch. Now, uh, another team with an interesting quarterback situation, and they're real happy, and they're going to be even happier on Thursday. They're going to be jumping around the kettle and all that fun stuff. I know Angel's not going to like this, but the Dallas Cowboys, they're 7-3 now, and they're just eating up these cupcakes. So they had the Carolina Panthers, who that poor team. They're 1-9 now. They obviously made a mistake with Bryce Young drafting him first overall, and they made the big trade. So now they're not even going to get the first overall pick. The Bears will. But they beat up on Carolina Panthers 33-10. And, Dak Prescott, he wins on the road for a change. But as I always say, Dallas loves to fatten up on these bad teams. Tony Pollard actually even got his first touchdown since week 1. And Dallas is hitting on all cylinders, and they still think they can catch the Eagles. And I'll look at their schedule as you kind of comment on Dallas. Where do you think they are, and do you think they can jump it back in this race?
Yeah, I mean, with Dallas, it's all about, like you said, eating up the cupcakes. Yeah, so as long as Dak plays within himself, Dallas has an identity now. Dak is just he's gonna do so much. Let Pollard, do his thing. Let the receivers do their thing. Play great defense. But I said, Angel, earlier on the Tony Bruno Sports Network, Martinez and company, basically, I worry about this game against the Commanders because the Commanders are backed into a hole and they're going to come out guns a-blazing. And these are the types of games, Lloyd, that Dallas, in the last 10 years or so, they're like put together like a stinker. Do I think they're going to do the same thing? Probably not. But the Cowboys better beware because the Commanders now, they're fighting for their playoff lives now.
Yeah, and the Commanders are fighting for their coach. We know obviously that Ron Rivera is on a very hot seat right now, and there may be some change coming. But Sam Howell's played pretty well. He's thrown up some huge stats. I think he's top 5 in yardage. He has a lot of touchdowns that he's thrown. And they have no fear. This used to be a huge rivalry when I was coming up, and
Yeah.
it will be. It's Thanksgiving, all the eyes on them, and Dallas wants to put on a good performance, but the other team does as well. Now the key thing, obviously, with the Washington Commanders is can they protect Sam Howell? He was on a pace at a certain point to get sacked like 97 times this season, and getting hit a lot. And then you have Michael Parsons on the other side. He had 2.5 sacks last week to get to 10, and he's double digit this first 3 years. The only guy in the NFL to ever do that. So that defense is playing very well, and then you have the corner that had his 4th pick 6 for Dallas in this game. I know it's against Carolina and Bryce Jones, a rookie, but it all counts. He's trying to break that record as well. So Dallas. This game's big. They want to finish off Washington and then get that mini bye that they always talk about after Thanksgiving. Then they have Seattle, and then they have Philadelphia. All 3 of those games are in the Jerry Dome, where they play usually very well. But then they have a big one at Buffalo, at Miami, Detroit, which I'm really looking forward to that one in Week 17. That could be a playoff preview. And then they finish at Washington, and that'll be interesting, what's on the line there. So, a mix of some winnable games and some tougher ones for Dallas. But with that Eagles stretch that we talked about earlier, if the Eagles stub their toe, they could be waiting for them. So, Dallas, the game against Carolina was kind of like, all right, nondescript. But, when we talk about the Eagles and a potential stubbing their toe, you can't talk about this week without talking about this game. This game was my survivor pool special. I was yelling at the TV, and I was like, "Oh God, why did I pick this team?" And I said, "Here's the same old Lions." The Lions were playing terrible. Jared Goff was throwing the ball in coverage. He had 3 interceptions.
Yep.
Nothing was clicking for him. And of all teams, they looked like they were going to lose to Matt Eberflus, who's a coach that's dead man walking. And the Chicago Bears and Justin Fields came back. He played pretty well for them. But they were handing this game, and the game was at home. So you talk about potential drop-off on Thanksgiving. Detroit's another team. They better be careful with Green Bay coming in there on Thanksgiving. They're the first game. But they're down 12 points with 4:15 left on the clock. And I'm like, this game's over. You know what I mean? And then next thing you know, just happenstance happens. And the Lions, they had all their timeouts. They used the 2-minute warning very well. And then Goff drives them down, and they get the game-winning score. And they pull this one out. Everybody was happy. And they was like, okay, we're not the same old Detroit Lions. They win 31-26. Huge win for them. Now they're 8-2. And they're only a game behind the Philadelphia Eagles. And the road possibly could go through, for the NFC, could go through Detroit.
Chicago should be ashamed of themselves. They should be embarrassed. They should give the fans back their money. Goff was doing he reverted back to the old Jared Goff. And like I said, I want to take the Lions seriously, Lloyd. I really do. But then you have performances on the road against Baltimore. And then you have a performance like that yesterday. Now, not the same old Lions. They gutted it out. It was a gut check, and they came back and won the football game. You can't have too many of those when you're heading into January and February, and then even in December. So, again, 2 teams, 2 organizations going in polar opposites of one another. Glad to see Detroit got the win, and dare I say it, Justin Fields' experiment in Chicago might be over after this year.
Well, we'll get into coaches on the hot seat, but Eberflus is done. And he's another one of these guys. He was a defensive coach, and his team can't get a stop. I know they don't have a lot on that team in terms of, but they did spend a lot of money in free agency. They bring Edmonds over from the Buffalo Bills. They made the trade for Sweat at the deadline, coming over from the Washington, and his group just could not get that stop that they needed. And as you said early on, Golf was just trying to hand him the game over and over again. And it feels, yeah, he did some nice things, but also he did some Justin Fields things where he's turning the football over in bad situations. And uh, I like DJ Moore. He's a guy that's stepping up for them. But other than DJ Moore, they don't have a lot on that Bears team in terms of explosiveness. I think at the end of the season, you're probably going to see that's a tear down. They're going to rip it down to the studs. You're going to see
Yeah.
probably Fields go to someplace else. You probably see Ryan Poles, their general manager, who's not been there that long, but he's made some bad decisions. They may probably get rid of him, and Eberflus doesn't have a chance. So,
Yep.
good win for Detroit and their team. They have a very favorable schedule, and we'll see how this plays out. So they have Green Bay this week. They're at New Orleans, who was on a bye, and they somehow lead the NFC South at 5-5. Then they're at Chicago, Denver, who we can get into. Denver's playing very well right now. At Minnesota, at Dallas, and then they finish with Minnesota. So, some winnable games there for the Detroit Lions, and they seem to be turning the corner, and they're just explosive. And it would be interesting to see if they could get that number one seed now. Angel could probably tell, and I listen to the radio here in Philadelphia. No one's afraid to go to Detroit, but you know they better be careful because the Lions are pesky and they have some playmakers on that team now. And now a team also in the NFC that really has turned it up, and their quarterback had a perfect rating.
Hmm.
The excuse me, the 49ers are now 7-3. Uh, they beat the poor Tampa Bay Bucks 27-14, and in this one, Brock Purdy had, as I said, had the perfect rating. And you're starting to see that defense come together. Chase Young getting heat from one side. Armstead's in there, Warner's making plays. There's just all pros all along that San Francisco team, and I still think they're going to be a force to reckon with. It right now. They're leading the NFC West again at 7-3, and then they have a huge game at Seattle this week.
Yeah, again, Purdy, when he doesn't turn the ball over and you turn it over to your defense, good things happen. I don't know how do you have a perfect rating when you're 21-25. Isn't perfect like 25 out of 25? I got to have a talk with the NFL about how they figure out with the quarterback rating. But yeah, Tampa Bay,
Yeah,
2 turnovers, San Francisco, none. When you have a quarterback playing like that that's not turning it over, and your defense is getting turnovers, and your defense is playing like that, I think San Francisco might now have like weathered the storm and
right.
turned a corner. And with Tampa Bay, again, Todd Bowles is a fantastic defensive minded coach. I just don't think he's a head coach in the NFL.
Yeah,
So, but again, in Baker, do we trust? Eh,
not this week.
no, no.
Yeah, Baker. Baker. He's Mr. Inconsistent, and that's why he's bounced around the last couple of years. He's done some good things for them, and the team's competitive at 4-6, and they still have an opportunity in that very bad NFC South. As I said, they're only a game behind the Saints, but if they do make it, they're going to have a lot of difficulty. So, good win for the Niners. As I said, they're going to play at Seattle this week. It's going to be interesting. I'm not sure if Geno Smith's going to play. Talking about injured quarterbacks, he has an elbow injury. They're trying to get some treatment, get him going because they need him. Because I'm going to
Yeah.
tell you, you talk about having a bad backup. Seattle's backup is Drew Lock, and when he came in that game against the Rams, you saw he had no chance. And Geno Smith's like, you know what? Give me a sleeve. I'll keep this thing warm. I'll give us an opportunity, and because Drew Lock, it just can't get it done. So San Francisco goes there. Then they're at Philly in the big game. Everybody's looking forward to. Seattle again at Arizona, who's on the comeback trail. The Ravens at Washington, and then the Rams in it. So San Francisco is going to have to prove it. They have some tough games there. On the road in particularly, and we'll see how they come through this. But I think, as we kind of said, they've righted the ship after that 3-game losing streak, and they seem to be a different team. You can't talk about this season without talking about this young man and everybody saying, well, you know what? He's not only the rookie of the year, but he's the MVP candidate. So CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans, they squeak one out at home over the Arizona Cardinals, 21-16. In the game, CJ Stroud threw 3 interceptions for the
Yep.
first time. He kind of forcing some passes. He finished 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. They still win the game, though. They're 6-4. And right now, if the playoffs started today, Houston would be in as your number 6 seed. So, Houston, a surprise team, doing a great job with D'Amico Ryans. And hopefully this thing will keep going because it's a great story.
Yeah, and I mean for Houston, I mean Stroud obviously faced a little bit of adversity with the 3 interceptions. Did throw the 2 touchdowns. I was happy to see Devin Singletary finally go off. 22 carries, 112 yards, a touch. Usually when you lose the turnover battle, you lose the football game. But again, D'Amico Ryans calm, cool, collected. His team is calm, cool, and collected, and they're taking on the identity of their coach. It'll be interesting to see how this rolls along for Houston. I mean, Arizona, their season's been over for like the longest time.
Yeah.
They still battled though. But, again, Houston's going to be a tough out. Like the last 7 weeks for anybody, whoever they play, they're going to be a tough out.
Yeah, and they're coming along. They're a young team. Believe in their coach. They got Bobby Slowick at the offensive coordinator position. As you said, he's establishing the run that allows for that play action to Dalton Schultz. And then Stroud and Tankdale really have formed a connection, those 2 young guys there. And they're going to be a fun team to watch. It's good to see them kind of bounce back because they had so many downtrodden years, in particularly with Deshaun Watson mess and coming back from that. And we'll see. So they have this is a big game this week in the AFC South, and if they're for real, we're going to see because they're 6-4 and they're playing at Jacksonville is coming to Houston this week, and we're going to see if Houston can take a step forward and if it's quarterback battle. Right now I may take Stroud over Trevor Lawrence because Trevor Lawrence. He has not thrown a lot of touchdown passes this season. Yes, he did have a rushing touchdown this past week in a big spot, but this game in Houston is going to be huge. And then Houston has Denver, who is 5-5 now. They've gotten back in the mix. They're on a 4-game winning streak. At the Jets, at Tennessee, Cleveland, Tennessee, and at Indy. So they have a lot of divisional games down the stretch, and we're really going to see if Stroud can step this up. Obviously, I said last year over and over again, everybody's sick of me saying it when Brock Purdy was on his run. No rookie quarterback has ever made the Super Bowl. So we'll see if CJ Stroud can buck that trend. But
Yeah.
I think there'll be a nice story that kind of dies off in Wild Card Weekend. Speaking of the AFC and a team that's in the mix, and you're like, okay, are they a contender? Are they a pretender? Another one that's fattened up on the cupcakes is the Miami Dolphins. They're now 7-3. They got a good win over the Raiders, who are now 5-6. It was 20-13. Kind of a slow, boring game, almost like we were talking about with the Eagles. They hung around and did just enough to get the W. And Miami is now the number 4 seed. They're leading the AFC East. And with Buffalo struggling so much, it looks like the Dolphins may take that division and kind of move ahead and hide with it because they're 2 games ahead of the Buffalo Bills. But Tua has not looked that great the last couple of weeks, particularly in that Germany game. He was missing some throws, and you're starting to see the deficiencies in their running game. So What did you think about Miami?
Yeah, I mean, both teams turned the ball over 3 times. Tyreek with the big game again. O'Connell for the Raiders turning it over with the 3 picks. Um, it was sort of like iffy back and forth, like the whole. I mean, I thought the Raiders were going to pull this one out there for a while, but again, gut check for Miami. Um, in the past, they would have lost games like this,
Yeah, I
so
agree.
it was good to see them like finish the job. They're probably more than likely going to win the division, but again, you don't know what the injury is going to be to A Chain. Um, he seems to now have that lingering injury. I know he tried to come back this past weekend, but
Right.
he tweaked something. And Mostert, what is Miami's identity now, because the running game has tailed off a lot, and Tyreek Hill can't do it at all. And where's Jalen Waddle, by the way?
Yeah, he's not making a lot of, and they have names all over that in that receiver room, and it seems like Tariq is the only guy that's really stepping up. Robbie Chosen and Claypool and the rest of those guys just not doing a lot for them. So, they came off their bye, they got to win, and we're really going to see when Miami still has some favorable games. Still, we talked about their easy schedule, and they fatten up on a lot of these bad teams. They scored 305 points up to this point. They're leading in scoring. But I think they lean on that 70 spot that they put up
Yeah,
earlier
a
this
little
season.
bit.
So they're at the Jets this week. That's a game they gotta take care of business. I know it's away from Miami, and it's going to be a cold environment. It could be rain, but they have to take care of business there. And we talked about earlier that the Jets are going to start Tim Boyle, so take care of business there. And then at Washington, Tennessee, the Jets again. Dallas should be an interesting game. At Baltimore and Buffalo, so they have that last 3 game stretch that's very interesting. And Miami, they could Buffalo could steal that division at the very end. Now we'll see if that actually happens, but Miami seems to be in a very comfortable position, but they have some things to work on. And Vic Fangio and that defense, uh, they're not doing that great of a job either. So, that defense has got to get better too. So,
Yeah.
so Miami's there. Um, and looking at the games, this one we talked about the coaches on a hot seat, and they got it done. And this put the nail in the quarterback's coffin. The Bills thumped the Jets 32-6 in this one. It seemed like that get right game that the Bills dearly needed. The Bills are now 6-5. They're in the hunt now. They're not even, if the playoffs started, they wouldn't be in the playoffs. But Josh Allen kind of cut down on his turnovers. They started getting a little running game from Cook. Um, and they get a good win there. And what are you seeing when you look at the Bills? Can they get back in this thing, or has the ship sailed? When we talk about Sean McDermott, he's another guy. They gave him an extension before the season, but this team has regressed, and
Yep.
and it's going to be interesting because the Bills have the Jets, then they're at Philadelphia. They finally have their bye. Some of these teams have that really late week 13 bye. Then they're at Kansas City, Dallas, at the Chargers, New England, and at Miami to close the season. So they have a tough schedule, and they're 6-5, and they're fighting for their playoff life.
Well, I mean, they ran the ball 38 times for 130 yards. I mean, that's ball control. And let's be honest. The Jets defense gave up. They're like, the hell with this. Our offense isn't doing anything. The Bills with 6 sacks. They sacked Wilson 5 times. Boyle 1. But I mean, do the Jets really think that they're going to win with Tim Boyle at quarterback? I mean, I know he can't be any worse, but I mean, the Bills, the Bills know what they have to do now. They put themselves in a hole. And now these last 7 games, they're really going to have to step up to the plate, because these other teams that are ahead of them are way ahead of the curve.
They are, and they lost some games that they shouldn't have earlier in the season, and now they have to. they have the right to ship. But at 6-5, they're so inconsistent. And we talk about Josh Allen, all the turnovers. He leads the NFL in turnovers, where it's fumbles and interceptions. He's got to do a better job there. And they also had some guys with drops as well. Gabe Davis has a tough season. He's not performing the way that they need to. And then that offensive line is very shaky at best for the Bills. So good win for them, but they have some tough games on horizon. As I said, you have Brandon Beane, the general manager there, Sean McDermott. You wonder, has the window closed on them? That's the big thing with them. Because we talked a couple years ago, they're in Kansas City, they lose in the playoffs, in overtime, and everybody's like, oh, they'll be back. Well, we see that so often around the National Football League that teams think they're going to come back automatically, but they won't.
Mm-hmm.
And a big thing is that I wanted to bring up is a trend. We know since 1990, there's always at least 4 new teams that make the playoffs. So a lot of teams kind of from the year before fall to the wayside. Last season, we saw 7 in 2022. There were 7 new teams in the playoffs. This season, teams that made the playoffs last year that I'm saying probably aren't going to be back. The Cincinnati Bengals are 5-5. I'd probably say at this point they're probably not going to be back. Tampa Bay at 4-6. And the way Baker's playing, they may not be back. The Giants, despite what Tommy DeVito did, my buddy Rich Quinones was all happy because Tommy put him in. He put him in the trunk. He put the Commanders in the trunk, and they got the big win. And then I also say the LA Chargers. They made the playoffs last year. They're 4-6. They're falling apart as well. Speaking of the Chargers, we'll hit on that game. Another awful watch. All right, you got the Green Bay Packers. The game was outside, so it was like, okay, you got a team traveling from out west, and they're a dome team, and it's going to be cold, and they're playing in Green Bay, and Herbert's just not getting it done. I know he's throwing the football a lot, and they're trying to make plays. But Austin Eckler had a huge fumble in this game, right in the red zone, right when they're about to score. You had Keenan Allen had a very bad drop at the goal line where it bounces off his chest plate. And this team, they let the Packers hang around.
Yep.
And then the Packers win 23-20 in an ugly game. The Chargers are now 0-5 this season in games that are 3 points or less, and it just shows you Staley can't close. They can't close the deal under Staley, and he's dead man walking in terms of being a coach. And you saw the frustration boil over in his presser. The reporter asked, it was a legitimate question,
Yep.
and he just went off on him. And I remember years ago, I was sitting at an Eagles press conference, and my buddy said something to Andy Reid. They lost a tough game at home to the Bears, and the team was kind of falling apart, and it was a season where they didn't make the playoffs. And he asked him, he said, do you feel your job's on the line? And I was sitting right next to my buddy, and he looked at him, he goes, you went over the line with that. He said, next question. He's like, you didn't need to ask that. You know what I mean? And it's just so interesting how these coaches try to bully the reporters. When I was coming along, reporters kind of were like, they were adversaries. They would take on a coach, but now a lot of these coaches all think they're kind of in that Bill Parcells mode. What do you think about the Chargers and this loss, and where Brandon Staley goes from here?
I mean, it's the same old thing. I mean, it's the same old thing year in and year out. You know what aggravates me about the Chargers, LV, is that they are wasting Justin Herbert's career there. He can't do it all. Mm-hmm. Keenan Allen with the drops, Eckler with the fumble. Jordan Love was 27-40, 322 yards, I think, 2 touchdowns, but no picks. And it affects the defense as well. So this organization is going to have to make some strong decisions after the season's over. I fully expect Staley to be gone. But, I mean, if I'm Justin Herbert, do I want to stick around? Because I just don't feel like they've I just can't get
Yeah,
a handle on the team. You know what I mean? It's just you're waiting for
yeah,
them to break out, and they don't break out.
they gave him that big contract,
I
so
know, I
he's
know.
there, and Tom Telesco, who's the general manager there, he's been there a number of years. Maybe he needs to go too, and they're drafting and has not. They seem to draft well on paper, but a lot of these guys just have not panned out. And then you look at this season, Bosa had a very bad foot injury. It looked like he was on a car crying and everything. It looks like maybe his season is over too. And it's just one struggle after the other for the Chargers. This team, another one we talk about, has failed to meet expectations. And you talk about all the talent that they've assembled and their quarterback who he could throw for 5,000 yards in his sleep, but they just can't close these games out. And yeah, a lot of change is coming there. Um, that's a good segue. We'll go over to, before we hit next week's games, coaches on the hot seat. Now, I'll play a game with you. I'll just name the coach, and you give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, whether they're there or not. Bill Belichick with the New England Patriots. They did not lose this week. They were on a bye though. Um, he's. It seems Robert Kraft has seen enough. Um, After that game over in Germany, they just like he looked like he was about to throw his hands up and say enough's enough. But I don't think Belichick will be fired. I think he'll kind of they'll step away from each other. Maybe they'll meet for a beer and they'll say, all right, enough's enough. 6 Super Bowl rings, thank you. So you think Belichick, thumbs up or down, staying in New England?
That'd be a thumbs down.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, Ryan, I think he will end up somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like what happened here in Philadelphia when I was covering Andy Reid. I think it was that 2014 season where everything fell apart and the Eagles fired him, and within a week he was at Kansas City, and
Right.
they gave him pretty much everything he wanted. I think there's going to be other situations around the league where Belichick can land, and obviously the cachet and the resume that he brings, ownership always wants to have a guy like him around. So, and I think he can actually do well someplace else. What he's got to do though is humble himself. We talk about these coaches in the bully bull pit. Maybe he lets somebody else run the personnel side, and he brings McDaniels with him to run offense or somebody. Because we know
Right.
McDaniels, he's better off as an OC. All right, this one's interesting because we were just talking about this team. Robert Salah with the Jets. Now the Jets, they've struggled as well. I know they put all their eggs in the basket of at the great Aaron Rodgers, and it ends after 4 snaps or so, and with the Achilles injury. Surprisingly, Ryan, do you think? Well, before we get to Salah, uh, Rodgers has been running. He's jogging, and he's trying to say he'll be back in December. I think he'd be crazy to come back. He'll be 40 by then, coming off that Achilles that was that not long ago. We just saw Akers go back down again with that Achilles after he rushed his comeback. What do you think, Rodgers? Do you think he was going to come back, or this is all just smoke and mirrors?
I mean, I think he'll come back. I don't know if it'll be with the Jets. um, we'll see. I mean, I'm tired of talking about Aaron Rodgers, to be quite honest with you, because Aaron Rodgers is all about Aaron Rodgers. I understand it. You did something to your Achilles and whatnot, but your butt should have been at every Jets game, mentoring Zach Wilson and tutoring him on how to go through the adversity. He did him no service and no justice by staying away from the team. Yeah, did he show up at a couple of games? Big deal. So he's going to come back. He does not want his career to end with an
Yeah,
injury like that. So he will come back, whether it's just for a year. He will come back at some point.
yeah. I don't think it's in 2023, but I think he will come back next
Yeah.
season. And it may be for a new coach. So I'll give the thumbs down on Salah. I just think another guy, like you were saying, Todd Bowles, he's a good defensive coordinator. He's obviously, that defense has a lot of teeth. But in terms of, you have to be CEO type when you're the head coach. You have to know all sides of the football. We've seen coaches fired for their special teams, so I think Salah has just not gotten it done, and I think the Jets are another team looking for a new coach.
Yeah, I mean, Salah's done, and the Jets will move on from him, and that'll be the end of that. And you're talking about Todd Bowles. I just don't think that it's going to work out there. He was up against it from the get go, and the talent on the team. I think after this year, the Tampa Bay is actually going to blow it up.
Yeah, now the interesting thing, Ryan, when all that went down with Bruce Arians leaving the team after they won and all that stuff, I to be honest with you, I thought that Byron Leftwich should have been named the head coach. But Byron Leftwich had a good relationship with Tom Brady. We know last season, yeah, they got to the playoffs at 8-9, but I just thought he was a more up and comer. He's kind of taken the year off, but they gave it to Todd Bowles because they said he had experience in the Jets, his past
Mm-hmm.
head coach. But as you said, another coach I'm going to give the thumbs down to. I know we know we have mutual friends, he and I, but I just don't think he's going to survive this, and the team is just kind of in disarray. You have some nice pieces there with Mike Evans and Winfield Jr., but there's not much there. They have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking. Mike Evans is basically playing without a contract. I mean, the contract negotiations brought. He said he was going to come back and play. Even though I don't have a contract or an extension or whatnot, I'm still going to play. Yeah, I just think after this year, they're just going to blow it up and start fresh.
Yeah, and interesting with Mike Evans, he went Rod Tidwell on him.
Yeah.
Jerry Maguire, he's betting on himself. And
Yep.
he's playing very well this season and doing a nice job. They're 4-6. They're still kind of in the mix, as I said. One game out of that division is as bad as they've been playing. I'll throw a couple more at you. This one's interesting because we talked about Tommy DeVito going in there and getting the job done in Washington, and Ron Rivera has done a stoic job for the Washington Commanders. He cleaned up a lot of the mess that Daniel Snyder had there. He came over as a veteran coach coming from the Carolina Panthers. But this is another situation where I just think a fresh start is needed. It's his fourth season there with Washington, and I just don't see it changing in anytime soon. So Ron Rivera, I'd probably give the thumbs down to there. Now, the interesting thing is we talked about Eric Bieniemy comes there as offensive coordinator. I think if things don't turn around right in like the last 6 games or so, maybe they pull the trigger and give Bieniemy his shot to be the interim head coach.
Or all the rumors that have been out there about Belichick going to the Commanders. How do you think that's going to make Eric Bieniemy feel? He may have been, promised, hey, things don't work out with Ron, we might turn to you. So, yeah, I think Washington's for the most part going to have to run the table, make a wild card, make a deep run. Then maybe Washington has a double take and says, okay, we'll give this one more year, but I don't see the turnaround coming.
Yeah. And here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game on the Broad Street South Network, we're going to jump to our Week 12 games. And this is an interesting week because, it's Thanksgiving and you have this crazy schedule out here. The NFL, they want their money. So you have 3 games on Thanksgiving. Now they have a Black Friday game, one game there, and then they have a bunch on Sunday as usual, and then there's a Monday night. So lots of football to watch. I love it, but it may be a bit much. They really need a Black Friday game, but that's a question for another game day. Thursday you have the Green Bay Packers at 4-6 going to Detroit. When I look at this one, Green Bay surprisingly won last week. We talked about that over the Chargers, but Detroit survived, and this is their chance for the national spotlight game. I think it's a get right situation for them. You're going to see Gibbs have a nice game, and Montgomery came back from injury last week. You'll see the good Jared Goff this week. Last week he had his 3 interceptions, but I think he'll play a lot better, and I think Detroit wins this one over Packers.
Yeah, I mean, the Packers will give him a tussle, but I think the Chicago game, Lloyd, was a little bit of a wake up call
Yes.
for Detroit. The bullseye is on their back now, and they're going to get teams' best shots. So yeah, I think Green Bay hangs around for a while, but I just think there's too much on both sides of the ball. I think Detroit wins the game.
Yeah. Next game, yeah, Washington Commanders. We talked about Sam Howell can put some points on the board, but that offensive line's got to protect him better. And you have Micah Parsons and the rest of those guys on the other side of it. So it's going to be interesting to see how they play at Dallas. That's at 4:30 on CBS. It's a national game. They have the big concert and everything. Um, I think in this one you're going to see the Dallas Cowboys, as I said, continue fattening up on his cupcakes as they get ready for that Eagles game on December 10th. But it's not going to be as easy as people think. They're going to have to establish a run in this one, even though the Commanders have waved the white flag by getting rid of two of their better defenders at the trade deadline. I still think they're going to put up an effort here for Ron Rivera. I think it'll be a closer game, but Dallas will win.
Yeah, there would be no more joy for Angel Martinez, our esteemed producer, for the Commanders to beat the Cowboys on Thanksgiving. But Dallas is just playing too well right now. They know what they have to do to keep pace. Again, Thanksgiving, Washington will play a lot better, but Dallas will pull away in the second half.
Yeah. And the nightcap, 8:20 on NBC. You have the Niners who've gotten right. They have two straight wins after that. Those three losses in a row. They're at Seattle. As I said, we're not sure if Geno Smith's going to play in this one. I think at this point you're going to see that Seattle line's a little beat up. You got
Mm-hmm.
Jason Peters is playing. I think he's 40, 41 years old out there. So I think they're going to have some problems. I think the Niners win this one and maybe a laugher.
Yeah, I don't like what I'm seeing out of Seattle, to be quite honest with you. I thought they'd be a little bit better. Um, San Francisco's got it rolling again. Seattle might hang around for a half, but I think San Francisco pulls away.
Yeah. All right. In the Black Friday game, we talked about this. The NFL wants their money. It's on Prime. So hopefully everybody has that, the Prime deals, and they want everybody buying Amazon stuff. Uh, the Miami Dolphins, the scoring machine, they're going to New York, and that New York defense, they better be ready, because I know Tyreek Hill's going to want to put a show on because they're the only game in town that day. I think Tua has a big game, and maybe you see Waddle kind of have a chance, to make a play here and there. Maybe Mostert gets going, but I think the Dolphins win this one big, and Salah gets in further trouble.
Yeah, I mean, do I really think Tim Boyle's going to be an answer at quarterback? No,
Come on, you like Tim Boyle.
no. The weather might play a factor, keeping like the Jets in it for a little bit, but this is a get right game for Miami. They'll get it right this game.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, Ryan, is Zach Wilson is now the third string quarterback of the Jets. So it's Boyle, it's Simeon, and then Zach Wilson. So the first round bonus baby, he's going to be looking for a new team next
Yeah.
year. All right, on Sunday, there's a couple games when you talk about the Bills. This is a big one. The Bills, they seem to kind of right the ship, but we'll see how they do. They're at Philadelphia. Philadelphia, this is a game. Hopefully they're not looking past the Bills. They had the big win in Kansas City. Then they have the Niners coming up in Dallas and Seattle. So they have some big games, but they can't look past any opponent, particularly Stephon Diggs and Kincaid in this one. They may get some numbers on that Eagles secondary. We know that allows a lot of passing yards. Now, I think the weather helped them out last night so that Patrick Mahomes didn't throw the ball all over the place on that defense. But in this one, I know Angel's not going to like this. I think the Bills pull a shocker, and they come to Philadelphia and win this game because the Eagles, they are on such an emotional high from beating Kansas City. I think their Bills are more desperate, and they win this one in a close game.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of has that feel to it, and I know I'm going to piss Angel off, but I'm used to that by now. So the Bills, again, one of those teams that are backed into a corner. and Philadelphia's been getting away with it and getting away with it and getting away with it. I picked the Eagles to beat the Chiefs this past weekend, but this week I think the Bills pull off the upset. I think they win it late in the fourth quarter.
Oh, so we'll see. So that was the voice of Ryan Neff, and I'm Lloyd Vance, and you're listening to Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game. Another great week here on the show. Angel pops on. And he's like, "Hold on, guys, hold on. Now you can't end your show and say that my Eagles are going to lose to the Bills after they had the biggest victory."
Yeah,
so I'll give you the last word. What do you think?
There's no way the Eagles are going to lose to the Bills. And as the producer here at Broad Street South and Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game, also the host at Martinez and Company, Ryan, today's your last day. I'm just going to give you your walking papers. Just want to let you know because too much trash talking from you, sir. Don't let me play that press conference all over again as I did in our show just over an hour ago, because there's been a lot of smack talk going on. Once again, let me remind everyone who won the game last night. It wasn't Kansas City. It was the Eagles. All right. So that was our game to win last night, as we did. So there's too much trash talking coming on. I had to jump on real quick. Lloyd, I still love you. Ryan, not so much. I keep telling you that every single time, and there's a reason why I don't love you. So regardless.
And Angel's like my father, the Eagles season ticket holder. Somehow they're expected to win every game. They're supposed to go 17-0. So, you gotta love a guy that loves bleeds green or whatever his team is, and he's going to support him no matter what, no matter it. So there's been some crazy times, but the Eagles with the big win, as we said, 29 million people watched that game. People are watching National Football League, and hopefully we can get those two teams in the postseason. I don't know if it's going to be a rematch of Super Bowl, but I think something crazy is going to happen. You got to have to factor the Ravens in there, Detroit in there. But there's a lot of teams in the hunt. So good game last night. Appreciate Angel producing the show, Ryan being on once again, and another fun week here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football, and we will catch you next week.